Welcome to day 5 of the We Shall Read Summer Literacy Series. My name is Kelly Gartner, and I am a brain-friendly reading tutor in Houston, Texas. I took the brain-friendly reading training in the fall of 2021, and then I started my tutoring business, and now I do it full-time, and I love it. So I'm excited to see what you're going to learn about tonight. Our presenter tonight is Kristin Dwyer. She's the co-author of the Brain Friendly Reading Program and the founder and executive director of We Shall Read.
So I'm Kristin Dwyer, and as Kelly said, I co-authored the Brain Friendly Reading Program and decided that we wanted to be able to expand its reach. So I founded a nonprofit, a 501c3 called We Shall Read, so that we could reduce the barriers to access for this kind of training. So we're going to be talking about the Brain Friendly Reading Teams chart, and we'll be looking at activities, reading and spelling activities with that teams chart, So when we think about reading in the country, we can look at this national 4th grade proficiency scores that we have that show us that about 5% of the kids are reading effortlessly, about 30% would read no matter what way you taught them. They might struggle with spelling a little bit, but in general, they seem to be really proficient readers. Then we have a bottom 65% of the kids who are struggling to read and spell well. Some of those are not because they're neurodivergent. That's about 10 to 20% of the kids at the bottom. The majority of them just need to be taught explicitly every part of our language and have enough repetition with that they are able to move it into long-term memory. So it doesn't mean teachers haven't taught it always, but it can mean that these children need more repetition. And if you really want to understand how we ended up in this place where about 35% of our kids are reading on grade level nationally, go listen to Sold a Story and I'll explain it to you. When teachers know how to teach according to the science, one of the pieces that they keep in the forefront of their mind is this issue that practice, repetition is a key foundational piece of the program. So when we're looking at children, it's helpful to understand that when we think about that bar graph, that those kiddos at the top who read effortlessly, those are probably in the top here as well, where they only needed 4 repetitions of seeing a word before they were able to store that word in their long-term memory, that letter sound combination. Most children need about 14, or a typical student needs about 14. Many of the students that are in that 35% need up to 40 repetitions with an individual word before they can store it into long-term memory. And that bottom 20% need up to 200. Now, of course, this is a sliding scale, but think about it, that if your bottom 65% need at least 40 repetitions, how are you going to get the children to do that? What are they going to do that's going to provide them with the repetition that they need in order to move that work into long-term memory? That was the question that we've been asking ourselves for decades, looking at all the instructional strategies that are available. And the beautiful piece about the communication around how the neurosciences are influencing what we're doing in education is that it's validating the kinds of instructional strategies that we're using the Brain Friendly Reading Program. We know that reading in all cultures relies on the same brain mechanisms. Sometimes I'll say the brain learns how to read one way. It doesn't matter what the language is. And that's almost always true. It's a much more complex process than what you see here, but we're distilling it down to 3 key pieces, which is the letter sound correspondence is a primary piece. It's a foundational piece for children to have in order to engage in self-teaching. We tell children that there's 3 parts of the brain that we have to work on in order to help the brain learn how to read. We have to know the sounds in our language. We have to be able to attach those sounds to letters and then blend those sounds together to make a word. And when we have that word, we attach it to meaning. Think of that as vocabulary. They have to know that when they read the word mop, what a mop is. If they've only ever heard Swiffer and they don't know mop, that's challenging because they don't make meaning out of the word mop. So vocabulary and background knowledge is also important. And we can think about that when we're looking at Scarborough's rope, which we've talked about on other nights. If you haven't ever watched a video on that, please go do so. But when we look at steps to reading fluently, we know that the children who read most easily, most quickly, have a lot of oral language development from the time they're born, that they engage in ear training around singing songs, clapping syllables, listening to rhymes, alliteration. They have all of this training of their ear around the sounds that are in our language, so that when the shapes get introduced, that then they just take the shapes and they attach those shapes that we call letters to the sounds. And we don't know for any given child how many repetitions we need, but we know that that ear training and that sound symbol connection, that letter sound work, is a key step. Sometimes children don't get enough repetition at this step, and it makes the next step very challenging, where they're asked to spell words and read individual words, but they're doing it all one word at a time, memorizing it. And they actually store it in a different part of the brain when they do that. So this ear training and sound symbol work is a foundational skill for reading, and it doesn't really matter if that's 6 or 60. So how can you bring the theory to life and help children learn vowel teams? So when we think about taking the research that's been done and we're saying, okay, we understand that sounds are important and letter sound combinations are important. How can we help the children then learn those, move those into long-term memory? Oftentimes teachers will say, I've taught it and we've repeated it, but go back to that repetition square. How many repetitions does it take for the dyslexic child to know it? What about the non-dyslexic child who's in your class, who's definitely not qualifying for services, or who's in your house, who may not be dyslexic? They might need 150 repetitions. How are they going to get those repetitions? That was the question we asked. We always asked ourselves, and that we field tested with parents and in classrooms. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the teams chart. Now, if you're here, it probably means you've attended or seen another video on tapping maybe the first chart. Maybe you saw it on Instagram or Facebook. We're going to talk about the teams chart and how it's a little bit different, how we do sound dictation a little bit differently, and as well as arm tapping. And then I'll be giving you strategies for how to move past just arm tapping and do arm tapping with spelling with the teams chart. So why do we tap the vowel teams sound chart? Because it provides a way for that repetition. It's like selling real estate. Instead of location. Here we're going for repetition. How many times does the child need to tap A, I, paint A, and write A, I, for the child's brain to know that A, I says A quickly and accurately when he sees it? That's called automaticity. Automaticity is that you can see the word automatic in there, right? That is just quick and accurate recall of that letter combination, so that when the child goes to read the word like paint, they read it quickly and accurately. And it's almost as if they've memorized it, but actually the brain is still decoding every single sound. It just happens so fast, it looks like a memorized word. So we're going to teach them how to tap the teams chart. Now, I'm not going to walk you through this process. We could spend 15 or 20 minutes. We would do that in the 30-hour training program. What I'm going to do is point you to the Brain Friendly Reading YouTube channel or website, where the video is of the teams chart being tapped, call and response. The best way to learn it is to start where somebody says it and then you repeat after me. If you're working with a child, it's great. You just play the video and the child can repeat after, well, it's me actually in the video, and you can learn the sounds right along with the child so that you make sure that you have the correct sounds as well. In your download, you have the keywords for the chart and you had a copy of the Teams chart. So this is what that looks like, call and response.
This is the brain-friendly reading Teams chart. Let's tap it all together. Ready? Begin. A, I, paint A.
A, I, paint A.
A, Y, hey A.
A, Y, hey A.
A, U, August, ah.
A, U, August, ah.
A, W, saw, ah.
A, W, saw, ah.
E, A, wheat, E.
E, A, wheat, E.
E, A, bread, F.
E, A, bread, F.
E, A, great, A.
E, A, great, A.
E,
And you go through the whole chart until you
I,
get toward the end.
ooh.
U, I, fruit, ooh.
U, E, blue, ooh.
U, E, blue, ooh.
U, E, rescue, U.
U, E, rescue, U.
A, R, car, R.
A, R, car, R.
O, R, orange, or.
O, R, orange, or.
E, R, flower,
E, R, flower,
I, R, bird,
I, R, bird,
U, R, church,
U, R, church,
So that is the Vowel Teams chart. And you'll notice on the Vowel Teams chart that you have all of those different vowel teams. And in the box at the bottom are the R controlled vowels, where the R makes the vowel say something different. Sometimes people refer to them as bossy R's. So when you're tapping the chart with the child, you can start with call and response, and then the child can just tap the chart. And I'm going to show you a video of that. And the chart tapping can happen in lots of different ways. The child can be standing or sitting, using a pointer, or using their finger. They can be singing the chart. They can be whispering the chart. You can chant the chart. I've been in classrooms with older students where they're like, A, I, paint A, Y, hey, A, U, August, ah, A, W, saw, ah. And the children sometimes lead this chart tapping after they've been doing it a while. And the child can choose the rhythm that they're using. They can use this as a musical, rhythmical activity. And even older children really enjoy doing it. In a high school classroom about a month ago with newcomers, children who were new to speaking and reading and writing English in Dearborn, they were tapping this chart and working really hard to know the sounds. Vowel sounds are what are challenging when somebody is learning a new language. The consonants are much easier and the short vowels are the hardest. So you can think about all the different ways that you can tap this chart, whole groups, small groups, with Parapro, all those different things. Here's a first grade classroom who's tapping the chart. In the chart bundle that's on the We Shall Read website, if you'd like to have all the charts with pictures, without pictures, with the directions, this progress monitoring chart also comes with it so that you can have a feel for what the steps are that a child can take to make chart tapping increasingly more challenging. Doing something familiar with a slight difference or with a new challenge wakes the brain up. It's part of what we understand about brain learning that is helpful. To do something familiar with a slight change maintains interest, and the child can lead this. You could put tally marks in these boxes that you're using with the child, perhaps at home this summer or even during the school year. So we're going to move on from chart tapping to a couple other pieces. And what I want to talk to you about is something called the orthographic mapping process. And it sounds really complicated. But what it really means is that we're just mapping the sounds in our language to the letters that we use for any given word. So in this case, the child is thinking of a duck, and the child sounds out d, k. And that part alone is a skill. It's why we play things like the secret decoder game. It's why we arm tap over and over and over again. That segmentation of words into sounds is not necessarily easy or intuitive for children. When a child is able to segment the word into the sounds, then the child who has tapped their charts or who knows these letter sound combinations hears the sound D and writes a D. Here's A and writes a U, and here's K, and they could write a C or a K, but this child's had a lesson that in a one-syllable word with one short vowel, we use CK to say K when the K touches the vowel. And that's a rule that gets taught explicitly and practiced over and over and over again with a series of words so that the child is able to learn that pattern. Pattern recognition can be low in children who are struggling to read. So being able to isolate the sounds and attach those sounds to the correct letters quickly and accurately is a key rung on the spelling ladder. When children are asked to spell and they don't know those letter sound combinations quickly or accurately, they really struggle to be good spellers. They do a lot of memorizing, but the brain can only memorize so many words before it gives up. And some children simply are better at memorizing than others are. It's much easier to teach them the letter sound combinations and how to spell words. When we're adding rungs to the ladder here in teacher language, we call that scaffolding. But what it means is that we're going to provide all of these much smaller steps that children can take when they need to in order to develop the skills so that they don't get left behind. How can we add rungs to the ladder and isolate the difficulty of spelling? Did you ever think about what that means, isolating the difficulty? It's where you say a sound to the child and the child writes the corresponding letter. Knowing what letters attach to what sounds is what comes before we ask children to write words. The skill that needs to be in place for children to truly be successful at doing what you saw in the duck picture is the letter sound or sound symbol combination. Training the ear to hear the sounds and training the brain to recognize which letters go with which sounds. Then the children are ready to write words. And when they're confident and competent with writing words, then we can write phrases and sentences and passages. And eventually they could write their own novel. Wouldn't that be exciting? All right, this is an example of sound dictation where I'm dictating sounds to a child and we're using her vowel team chart. Notice what she does and then we'll talk about it.
Okay, so we've tapped our chart and now I'm going to give you some sounds and you are going to write the sounds right here. I'm going to take your chart away. Okay, are you ready? Here's the first sound, oi. Can you say it back to me?
Oi.
Okay, go ahead and write it right here. What says oi? O-I.
Oi.
Great.
O-Y.
Awesome. Now here's the next one. R. R.
A. R. R.
Good. How about or?
O. R. Or.
Right here. Let's write ah.
A. U. A. W.
Well, you got all of those. If you needed to, I could have given you the picture to help you remember, or I could have even shown you the chart, but you didn't need that help, did you?
So what you noticed here that's different when you're doing sound dictation with vowel teams is that the teacher still says the sound and the child repeats it. I prompted her to repeat it, but I opted not to continue to remind her because she seemed fairly confident in what she was doing. But we want the children to repeat the sound so we know that they have heard the right sound. It also helps to wake the brain up when the mouth says the sound. It helps the child who is still practicing pulling up the letters that go with the sound. Having them say the sound is an aid to that. So then the child writes the letter combination. What's different with vowel teams is that they say the letter names and then underline both letters, or if it's 3 or 4 letters like EIGH, they underline it saying the sound. So they don't say it and then underline it saying oi. They say the letter names O, I, and then underline it with the correct sound oi. And you notice too that for the ones that I gave her, many of them had 2 letter combinations that made the same sound. So we want the child to write all the letter combinations the child has been taught up to that point that go with the sound. And really quickly and simply, all that means is that if you've tapped the first chart and you give the sound what, you're only looking for them to write W. If you haven't tapped the blend chart where WH lives, you're not going to be asking them to include a skill that they haven't been taught yet. So they write all the letter combinations that they have been taught that go with that sound. If you have questions about that sound dictation piece, you can ask. And just as a point of reminder that in the training companion guide, which has all the lessons and all the games and 18 pages of instructions, this is what it looks like for sound dictation. What you have for option 1, where the child is writing the sounds, how you can do seek and find, what do you do about 2 or 3 letter graphemes like blends, how are teams and digraphs different. So the next piece that's different with vowel teams, but is really so straightforward in some ways, the vowel almost always sits on the elbow when you're arm tapping. And that doesn't matter whether you're doing a single syllable word or a multi-syllable word. And you'll notice that she's still learning how to pound out syllables. She doesn't do it correctly the first time, but she pulls through and gets it to the place where it is 2 syllables, and then arm spells the 2 syllables. But notice where she struggles and how Kelly supports her.
Your first word is grief.
G-R-E. Wait, G-R-E. Grief.
Yes. Okay. Next word is believe. Say the word.
Believe. Believe.
Believe. Good. What's first syllable?
B. B. E. B.
What's the second syllable?
B. E. B. Leave.
Good. Your next word is protein. Say it back to me.
Protein.
Good.
Pro-T.
Protein. Good.
Pro. Pro. E-N. T.
Good. Protein.
So what you notice there is similar to what I did with the other child, where I started to just support them by, you might say, giving them the right answer, but I like to think of it as doing it chorally, that we're doing it together, that I'm doing the work with them. I'm helping them to do some of the thinking and then back off really quickly when I realized they don't need me anymore. I did it with the sound dictation where I started to do the work with her. And as soon as she caught on to what she needed to do, I stopped talking. But instead of stopping her, giving her a bunch of oral directions, now I want you to do blah, 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 blah. Don't just work with the child, helping them as if you're their second brain, helping them to be successful, to go, oh yeah, I remember, without giving them any instruction. Typically, the child doesn't need you to give them instruction, as you see this child self-correct over and over again as Kelly supports her with just a little bit of verbal instruction. She could also be arm tapping with her. Maybe she's I doubt she is because she's holding a camera, but she could also be arm tapping with the child so that she and the child are doing it together. That's always an option, particularly when you're working with children for whom you've done this quite a bit and it's still challenging for them, that you arm tap together. Let's be a team and let's arm tap these words together. Then the child isn't hanging out there all on their own, trying to perform and do it right, especially for a child who has a lot of anxiety. So that's arm tapping orally. for single syllable words and multi-syllable words. And what you saw was that the first sound or blend or chunk goes on your shoulder, the vowel team goes on the elbow, and the ending part is on your wrist. And we're still keeping chunks together. We're keeping the blends together. Yes, it's 2 letters that make 2 sounds. So we cover blends in 4 lessons. Some people need those lessons. Some children don't need those lessons. And those are instructional choices that can be made, but they're there for you when you need them. But when we're arm spelling, we're keeping purr together, and children know that it's purr because they've tapped their blend chart and they know PR comes at the beginning of words and it says purr. And when I hear purr, it's probably this. Could it also be ER, IR, your? Yes, it could be, but there's instruction that helps the children know whether that first syllable has a vowel or doesn't have a vowel. And that helps them to know whether they're working with a bossy R or whether they're working with a blend. So that's part of the program for those of you that have that prior instruction or learning from someplace else. So you have an understanding about that. All right. So when we're arm tapping for spelling with vowel teams, we have resources that we can use. Inside of the training companion guide, there's a lesson page, like I chose the EE page. There are 2 game pages. One is at a more simple level. The other one is obviously more sophisticated. We call these Go Fish games because if you have 2 pages for any one of these games, that makes a card deck. And there's a variety of different games that you can play with a card deck. So in your training companion guide, you just have 1 page of each, knowing that you can print out as many copies as you need. This EE page that you see isn't for one child in one lesson. This is a resource page primarily for a teacher or a parent or a tutor to have, where it goes from simple to more complex, so that you can work with a variety of children using the same page, and that there's more than one skill on here. There's suffixes, there's 2-syllable words, there's SE and ZE at the end. We have words that go from short vowel to long vowel, which is challenging for some children, where they read wed and weed and fed and feed. We're building that pattern recognition in the brain. Those are wonderful words to dictate to children and see if they can isolate the sound and determine whether it's 1 E or 2 E's needed. And then there's phrases and sentences, and almost all of our pages have a very similar, well, they're not all the same, but they all go from simple to complex. They all have more than one skill, and they all have words, phrases, and sentences by and large. So we're going to work with these pages to do some arm tapping and spelling. But first, I thought I would show you just a couple of examples of what I mean by that. That we use the arm tapping technique orally with young children, but very quickly we teach children how to arm tap a word, attach the letters to it, just like as we did in the duck diagram, and then write the letters or build the words with letter tiles. On the left, you see a first grader that made their own bingo board, and they wrote the words that had been dictated, and then they played bingo. You wouldn't believe how excited children are to be able to play bingo. They forget that you're dictating words to them to write. They're just like, let's get our board filled up. And this is true all the way up into 5th grade classrooms, even 6th grade classrooms where I've taught this. Now, the words might change. We might not be working on CK in a 5th grade classroom, although I will tell you there are a lot of 5th graders who have no clue when to use CK and when they don't, except for what they've memorized. But this middle 10-second video is on the TION page, and you can see that their teacher did some syllable division work with them with TION, and then she dictated the words, and that looks like this. And you can see in that she laminated bingo boards and let them use the write on wipe off to write their words in, and then they played bingo, and then they'd erase it, and they would do this over and over and over again. This was part of their spelling work to do this. And the kids loved to do it, and they were unhappy if they missed their opportunity to do that syllable division and then the writing. So they did reading and writing as part of the same activity. On the far right is an example of a child making their own Go Fish cards. So I showed you for EE some pre-prepared Go Fish cards. For years, when we were doing this work, we did not have pre-prepared cards because we'd never written the brain-friendly reading program. So we would either create the cards, and quickly we realized that when the children were involved in writing their own cards, that the impact was far more significant. When we incorporated spelling, creating the cards, and then playing the game, they were able to do both the spelling component and the reading component all in one activity. Does it take longer? Yes. But the arm spelling and the writing is really one of the secret sauces of the brain-friendly reading program. So inside of your training companion guide, you have a list, the page that I showed you, and you have your Go Fish page 1, and you have Go Fish page 2. And if it's digital, then it's digital. But you can use this as your resource so that you don't have to worry about, oh, where do I get this list of words from? Or what if I start out over here and it seems too easy in a lesson? Do I have some other things that I can move on to teaching the child? And the answer is yes. And you can use even a Go Fish page as a page of words that you use to dictate to the child to either read. I mean, if you're going to dictate them to the child, it's for spelling, but you can dictate these to the child also. So you have lots and lots of options of ways to layer this work or level it up. You could choose to make a bingo board and dictate a word to the child, and the child arm spells it and puts it on their bingo board. You can also use a blank game board, and it's a little bit smaller, so you need a child who's able to write fairly small. Or I know some special education teachers who blew this up and laminated it and use it with their children with a write-on wipe-off marker. Inside the brain-friendly reading guide, there's also this blank template to make Go Fish cards that you saw the first grade teacher use this as a bingo board as well. So you can use any of the options that you have here. I'm going to show you how to use this board to arm spell and write words. And if this was too much for one session with a child, you were like, there's no way they're going to make 15 words, then cut it. This is a great one to be able to cut down and say, oh, you know what? We're going to play bingo, but we're just going to have it be a 3x3 array. So then we have to write 9 words. I've worked with children where we made a bingo board that looked like this. Getting 6 words written was their maximum amount that they were going to write, and they didn't care. At the end, we were playing bingo, and they got to choose whether you won if you got a row or if you got a column. And does it matter to us? No, we want the child to work at their level and then walk away feeling successful and knowing that they have gotten what their brain needs at their ability at that moment. So when you're making a bingo board for a child and you're saying, okay, I'm going to give you a word to spell, the child's going to give you the word back. And I'm just looking here, even at this page, and I'm going to pull words off of this page to dictate. And I'm going to say, our first word is meat. Say it back to me, meat. And then the child puts it on their arm. Eat. Except, did you notice where their pen was? Right here. And they'll inevitably write them themselves, or they put their pen down. So the first thing we want to do is get their hand ready to write. And then we're going to say, here's our first word, meat. And they put it on their arm. Eat. What did you hear first? What's in the middle? E. What's at the end? T. Great. And they chose where they wanted to put it on their arm. Let's do another one. Let's do the word sheep. Say it back to me, sheep. Let's arm spell it. Sheep. Sheep. What's at the beginning? Sh. What's in the middle? E. What's at the end? And some children will need to go back and arm spell it again to find those sounds. If they have low working memory, they may not remember it. So if they get through, like, I'll give you an example. Let's do the word green. Say it back to me, green. And you're arm spelling with them, and you go gur, e, n, gur, e, n. What's at the beginning? Gur. What says gur? And they're like, I forgot. And you say, give them the keyword from their chart, GR, grapes, and let them see if they come up with gur on it. then that would be one where you'd make a note that you need to do some sound dictation with that child, or they need to write GR multiple times to get that stored in long-term memory. So if they get the GR and they've spent a long time, just like I did, trying to figure out what the heck GR is, they might have forgotten the word. So you give them the word again. Green, let's have spell it again. GR, E, GR, E. And just like Kelly and I did, you prompt with your voice and with your body. E. What comes at the end? And you're doing all this vocalizing with them while they are writing. And when I go into special education teachers and I'm working with them, that's the number one skill, that when I show them how to do that, it makes a huge difference for the children. Because the children, if they could go tree, tur, e, what comes first? Tur, what's next? E. If they could do that, they probably wouldn't be in special ed. Week, and they say it back to you, w, e, and they go to write it. What comes at the beginning? W, e, and you're doing all of this vocal support with them. W, e, and maybe they write this because I know CK says k, right? You can choose right then to either address that or not. If you're working with a child that you know can take that kind of instruction, when you're like, oh, CK, let's check our rule for CK in a one-syllable word. Let's see, is week one syllable? Week. Yes, it is. In a one-syllable word with one short vowel. Yes, and you pull out your short vowel chart. Oh, that's not a short vowel, is it? No, it's not. So in this case, it's going to be with a K. Let's write it again. W, E, K. So you can stop right there and give a mini lesson, but remember the goal here isn't for them to spell every single piece perfectly. This lets you know that they need review work here. You could just count it up as review work and give it to them correctly. Oh, this one actually has a K at the end, and skip the re-instruction. So you decide how much you want to do, because the goal is to finish the board. And if they get too discouraged before they finish the board, they won't. But if you're giving them words that are at their skill level, notice I didn't give any two-syllable words, but I might have a child who's working at the multisyllabic level. And if I do, I have words that I can dictate that are multisyllabic for that child. And I can add suffixes to them to make them multisyllabic. So make that instructional choice and work at the level that the child is able to work at. One of the other games that we love to play that's so fast, and the third grade teacher, Julie Marsh, who teaches in South Redford, she said this year, she learned how to do this a year ago, spent a year really becoming an expert at it, had huge results in her classroom, and this year has been working with other teachers and supporting them and pioneering what works really well with populations of children who need additional work with vocabulary and comprehension in those pieces. This looks like a bingo board, but really it's tic-tac-toe. And this game is so fast that you and a partner can play, you and your student can play if you're working one-on-one. If you have two kiddos, they can play. One of them are X's and one of them are O's. I'm going to choose the word treetop that's right in front of me. And we're going to pound it first. And we're going to say tree top. This is just like clapping syllables, but for children who are older, pounding works. Some kids will pound it on their desk. It doesn't matter. Our first syllable is tree, tur, e. Oh, what comes first? This was X. So now it's O's turn. What comes first? Tur. What's in the middle? E. Treetop. Tree top. What's our second syllable? Top. Ah. What comes first? T. What's in the middle? Ah. What's at the end? P. Treetop. So now X is made one space, O is made one space. And then sometimes I have the kids, if it's available in their classroom, to choose two different colors so they can easily discriminate between their words and their friends' words. And X will write another word. And then O might write a word here. And then X may realize that they can win by writing a word here. And they've finished. and they've only been able to write 2 or 3 words, but then you play again. So this is a game that you can finish. And if you're working with a group, you might dictate 2 more words and let other people win, and then say, all right, let's start again. They erase their board and they start again. So it's a game that you can play when you have just a couple of minutes or you don't know quite how long you're going to have, because making a bingo board and then playing bingo is probably, making the board is probably a 10-minute activity, depending on the age and ability. And then playing could be another 5 minutes or so. So you need to have a chunk of time. So those are 2 strategies for arm spelling and writing. Could you just take words and dictate to the child and have the child arm spell them and then write them one sound at a time? Absolutely. You can do that. They can do that on a write on wipe off board. They can do that in, nobody has chalkboards anymore, but I certainly do love chalkboards. They can do it just on paper. So they can do it on their desks, right? So people like, there's no more paper. I know everybody seems to write everything with a write on wipe off on their desk. But it doesn't matter. I actually, in many classrooms, have taken their children have a desk. I teach them how to draw 2 parallel lines, 2 horizontal lines. They make a rectangle. And then we find our dots on either end and we draw 2 more horizontal lines, 2 more vertical lines. And we're using all this math language, particularly with older children, to create like a 3x3 array on their write on wipe off board or their desk. And then they've made their bingo board. We fill in their bingo board and we play. And you don't have to have a deck of cards. If you're the teacher, you just call out the words. And I often do that when I'm tutoring as well. I just call out the words that are on our board. So it makes it almost no prep. All you need is the children to know how to arm spell and to have a way for them to be able to create a bingo board or to create a tic-tac-toe board on a piece of paper or whatnot. But that's the arm spelling and writing piece. And that's the orthographic mapping component of the work that's so important. And it can't really happen unless the kids have all that sound symbol work that they have to have in order to be able to know what letters can go with what sounds.
Nine, 10. I'm gonna count my 1, 2.
Oh, I can do this one. Green.
So,
Okay,
is it my turn?
Huh?
Change the color
Oh my gosh.
to green.
To green? Okay. Wee!
Skip.
Oh no!
Seep.
Tree.
Seep. Minnie Mouse.
Oh my gosh.
Minnie Mouse. Minnie Mouse. Greek.
Greek. Leak.
Scene.
Oh, wait, hold on. Spleen.
Week.
B.
V.
C.
Change the color to blue.
To blue?
Your turn.
Oh no, sleet.
Skip. I won.
Good game. What I most love about that is the joy that's taking place while they are learning, while he's engaged in this learning process. From his point of view, all he's doing is just playing a game with his tutor. But what he's really doing is looking at patterns that are in words, being able to read words over and over again by playing the game, because it's so much fun. They want to play it again. And we're building that speed and accuracy when he plays it again. Even though he was able to read them pretty easily, maybe what Kelly would do is say, oh, I have another card set that we can play with and level it up and have it be a little bit more challenging. Or maybe his issue is that the spelling, the segmenting, and the writing is his point of need. And he plays the game first as a preparation for being more successful with the writing. All these different Uno decks are available. They are in color. This is something you might want to keep and that you pull out. And the part of our lesson sequence that we've been talking about today is tapping the chart, sound dictation. Perhaps we could pretend that I gave a lesson on EE says E, and we wrote EE 9 times. And then we engaged in this word study with meaningful repetition. Arm tapping words, and creating a game and playing a game. So at weshallread.org, there's a Find a Tutor page. There's also one at Brain Friendly Reading. If you want to find more instructional videos, you can do that on either one of the YouTube channels. And on the We Shall Read YouTube channel, there's a bite-sized PD called Tools in 10. Those are 10 minutes of really condensed professional development that really are suitable for anybody who works with children. If you're a new tutor or a tutor at all, and you'd like some tips for establishing and growing your tutoring business, you can get that at the We Shall Read YouTube channel as well. There's a QR code here that'll take you to the Tools in 10 for TION, SION, and CIAN. If you're taking the Mentor Me program or the Brain Friendly Reading program, and you're wondering what Tools in 10 is about, this is a great one for you to take a look at on a skill that we don't cover that in depth in the program. And there's another QR code that'll take you to the prepared board games. If you saw prepared board games and you were like, ooh, I would like those. I know the teachers have loved having some prepared board games for the children to play. We Shall Read provides grant-funded brain-friendly reading training through its Mentor Me course. There are a couple of different ways. The asynchronous course is always available for $225, thanks to our local grant. Then in Southeast Michigan, we'll be training in the fall at a local library in Southeast Michigan. We'll also have a Saturday course that we hope will be completely grant funded. Just got word that we'll be returning to the Dearborn Public Library, the Henry Ford Centennial Library, to offer the 30-hour course again this next winter, in winter of 2024, in the same format that we did this last time for about 30 people. And hopefully those will all be completely grant funded. We are also looking forward to working in the schools where we have contracts this next fall and next school year. If you have a school that you would like us to work with, let us know and we'll see if we can fit you into the schedule.
In the chat that we're going to have, well, it's brand new sets of board games. We're going to expand what we have available for the board games on the Brain Friendly Reading website soon. So definitely check back and look for those. There are 10 sets of games, hundreds of game boards ready to go. Hundreds.
And you know, it's not that playing game boards is going to be the thing that's going to take your dyslexic child from not reading to reading, but it sure is fun to have a game board to play sometimes. And it encourages them to read. It encourages them to read the same words over and over as they play the game over and over and over again. So these games are not one and done. They're meant for the children to be like, that was fun, I'll play it again.
I've had one child who in the middle of the game, they were not winning. And so in the middle of the game, they said, can we play this again? It's like,
ready for a rematch.
You know, like anticipating, if I don't win this game, I want to play it again. So
right. I think it's the natural state of childhood, right, to be in a state of play. And we certainly know that the brain is more amenable to learning something new and storing it in long-term memory when there's no stress and anxiety and the children are in a state of play. And as we heard you, Kelly, in your video on that Uno, that you were both having fun. And what better thing to do than to have fun playing with children, helping them grow their skills. And at the same time, have the strategy you use be really highly effective in building that pattern recognition in the brain.